Hello and welcome back to McClaren Performance for an episode where I kind of want to talk about how football is changing in terms of how it operates, but also its relationship with the media and the fans. And take a look at why a lot of those clubs are struggling to adapt to that, specifically though, struggling to adapt to how they communicate with their fans. Really, I think that problem it stems from two places. For one, like I said, the way in which clubs are being run it is changing. For example, more people are being employed, and with that, I think less responsibility is on the manager alone. Take, for example, Sir Alex and Arsene Wenger. They ran a large portion of the clubs back in the day, and more importantly, they were the face of it. So it was their team, and that was kind of the narrative, and it still is the narrative within the fan base and the media. Because for the fans, that's who they heard from. And there's frustration now a lot because that's the only person that we hear from. When we know there are more people behind the scenes with other big responsibilities. And there's a big change in football right now, specifically with the introduction of the technical director, the person responsible for the entire football operation. But what is also going on is that role's relationship with the media. Take Dan Ashworth, for example, going into Newcastle United. I've never seen this before. You know, managers get this treatment and players get this treatment, but I've never seen someone behind the scenes come into a club and be taking photo shoots and having interviews and really talking to the fans. It's because we're at a place now where fans are educated enough. They want to hear from a technical director because they know that person is in charge with a long-term vision of the club. So yeah, the power dynamics within clubs are changing. There's figures like Dan Ashworth and other technical directors who are taking a lot of responsibility and taking charge of a lot of what is happening within the club, and fans understand that. Why they understand that, though, is quite important. I think why they do understand and why that is changing is with the evolution of social media. Everyone knows everything in football all the time. There isn't any secrets anymore. And I've seen that so much recently with what's going on, say, with Manchester United and our little involvement with that at the moment. I go through a lot on Twitter now, and so much of my feed is to do with Manchester United, obviously. But with that, there's so many Manchester United fan channels. I didn't even realise how many there were, and I see them all the time. And it's so interesting how that is something that's come about in the last few years. And I think they are a result of the world shifting into being more open, being more social media driven, and wanting to know everything all the time, and clubs not really adapting to that. Fans aren't really hearing from their clubs, so they're going elsewhere. They don't feel connected to their clubs and those that run them, so they follow these other communities, third parties that they know will be honest, or so they think, because so and so reports this and so and so says this, and this quote gets pushed around. It's unbelievable. It's such an interesting perspective I have at the moment with what we're doing with the podcast. And say last episode, talking about culture and environment, and such an in-depth conversation where you could take a lot from that 30-minute conversation, and then you see what is taken from that 30-minute conversation. Really, it's just two quotes, so everything kind of gets condensed and then it gets pushed out, and then you see all these different accounts. They found the, so they take the quote, they do that with it, they do that with it. It's like a feeding frenzy of these two quotes, and suddenly that's what gets pushed out. And then also that narrative gets pushed out as well. So suddenly you say something and you have the conversation, and it gets distorted and condensed into something else that then gets taken to what everybody else sees, and then that becomes the message of it. But not just that, I see it with everything now. I just go through Twitter at the moment, and suddenly, Ronaldo's leaving. Oh no, he's staying now. It's something completely different all the time, and each source is so confident in what they're saying. There's just so much noise and no real cohesive message going through. I don't know about Ronaldo. I don't know at all. But what I'm saying is that it's just so much of different thoughts and ideas and answers, and there's no, like I said, there's no real cohesive message. And that's what's really changing when I think it comes to social media. It has the potential to be so messy. It has the potential for anybody to say whatever they want. So the message can be 1,000 different things. And instead of it coming from the club, it's coming from the, say, fan channels or other accounts or whatever. And so everyone's coming a bit more divided. Instead of there being that one cohesive message of, we are this club and this is what we believe in. And then when there are issues, the club communicates to their fan base. So that's the change that I'm seeing, really. One, with the dynamics of the clubs. No longer is the manager the head guy. It's now more so the technical director, the owners, the recruitment. There's so many different aspects now, and with that, no real one head figure. And my other issue, the other thing that is changing is the development of social media. Of course, it's been here for a long time, but the reliance upon it and everything that's developing around it, it's all changing how fans communicate with each other and how fans communicate with the club and how the club communicates with the fans. So they're the two things, really. And in a number of cases, I think that's led to, some growing pains where most clubs haven't quite found their footing in terms of the best way to do that, the best way to communicate with their fan base. Take Derby County, for example, where, of course, they're in a terrible situation, club under administration, and that being dragged out for so long. And, they thought they had a solution in Chris Kirshner, someone who went on to be quite open on social media. And he was always communicating on Twitter, the deal's going through, everything's going to be fine, just a matter of this happening, that happening. And that's some really good communication. Fans were really on board with that because fans felt assured that they were getting an owner that would, be transparent with them. The problem was it all fell through. And none of what he actually said happened. So he comes across like an idiot and everything looks even more of a mess than it did before. And really saying everything he said was never a good idea. And I think it's difficult because you always run that risk of being an idiot, really. But I think it's worth that risk in many cases because the positives outweigh the negatives. I think take the podcast, for example, what we're doing at the moment. I think we run a really big risk of looking like idiots at the end of the day because, say, like last episode, we're talking about, building a winning culture and some interesting stuff in that. But also it comes to a point where that has to become a reality at Manchester United. And if it doesn't, then that reflects on Dad, the things that he said. And you always run that risk. But I think that the positives of having that open communication with the fans and them being able to hear things, I think that outweighs the negatives of the reaction you might get when things go wrong. I think you'll be rewarded more for the open communication that you do have. And that's the case with Richard Arnold at the moment when he went to speak to fans outside his house. He spoke openly and honestly, and it's been, really well received. Now, surely that's something that can be done on a regular basis in a more controlled environment as well, because at least fans get to feel heard. And it's not like you have to do everything they say. It's not like if a fan comes up to you and say, oh, you've got to sign so-and-so, and this is the direction the club should be taking. It's not like you actually have to do that. Fans just want to be heard, I think, at the end of the day. And they want to have responses from the clubs that they look up to and the clubs that they support. And you might say that's irrelevant because at the end of the day, teams just need to win games. And if they win games and fans are happy and everyone's happy, it's all fine. But I'd argue that fan engagement and that interaction has a significant contribution to the performances on the pitch, especially over the long term. I think as a whole, the club should really be considering 4 aspects of itself, that being the owners, the staff, the players, and the fans. And that unity across the board is the best thing for performance. The best example of it, I think, at the moment, is Newcastle United. Yes, there's owners that are coming with a lot of money, but I think what they've done a lot of is listen to the fans and what they want. Not in terms of signings on the pitch, but, for example, Shearer's Bar and moving the statue as well. And just think small things like that, I think, make a big difference. And then you see that on the pitch. The second half of the season, the unity between the fans, the owners, the staff, the players, you can see it all within the stadium all at once, and you can see it in the performances. That St James's Park is an absolute fortress at the moment, and the psychology behind that is the unity between those 4 components, especially the fans, because you've seen the performances of Newcastle without the fan support, without their investment, with that disconnect between owner and fans. And you've seen how that translates onto the pitch. But it's not just money, it's unity, it's communication. And for Newcastle United, that's one thing they're doing really well. So how does any club gain that going forward? How do they properly communicate and get their fans on board? Well, I think I got 3 kind of ideas for that. One is that I think there should be a figurehead behind the scenes to regularly speak to the media. Yes, that used to be the manager and can still consistently be the manager with regards to, weekly press meetings and pre-match, post-match interviews, all of that. But say the role of the technical director, for that role to be a bit more outspoken, to receive messages from fans and respond to things, I think is a good idea. So take Dan Ashworth, for example. He can be open with the fan base of Newcastle United. The second aspect, and I kind of touched on it there, is to understand the consensus of the fans, what the messages is within social media and every aspect of that, and then present questions to that figurehead and have them answer those questions. I think, say for the case of Richard Arnold, that can be a thing that can consistently happen, but in a more controlled environment where you're not talking about transfers and what's going on. There's business behind the scenes that needs to be kept secret for the functioning of the club. But there are also other aspects that you can be more open about and talk about, the state of the club. I think admitting mistakes is such a good thing that a club can do, because everyone sees it. You might as well talk about it, because that's really my third point, is understand what to say and what not to say. If you're Chris Kirschner, understand that's not what you say. In those moments, in those points where things could go one way or the other, it's best not to say anything, which is most cases in football. But there are aspects that you can talk about and be more open about. So it's understanding, and it's different for every club, I imagine, what to say and what not to say. And fans will understand that. They know that some things have to be kept behind the scenes, but I think they will appreciate that openness and that, being seen. It's all better than absolute silence, which I think is what a lot of the clubs at the moment are doing. So yeah, that's really my thoughts on fan engagement and communication, and something I've been interested in a little bit since doing this podcast as well, is seeing that aspect of things, but also the psychology behind it as well. Anyway, thank you for watching and listening as always, and I'll see you again next week.